Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ohio State Buckeyes Live, our 72nd edition. I am Tony Gerdeman, joined here, as always, with Kevin Noon and Steve Hellwagon. Fellas, practice has started. I don't know if we can call it camp yet for Ohio State because for me, it's not really camp until the pads go on, and we know that's not going to happen until September 30 when all of the testing and all of that stuff is done and available. But we are in the midst of camp because we did get to talk to Kerry Combs and a couple of players this week. The Ryan Day Show has now had 2 weeks of tremendous content for us. And then later today, we will get to talk to Kevin Wilson and the tight ends. And I guess we should just start there. Kevin, is this the year of the tight end at Ohio State?
Every year is the year of the tight end at Ohio State, and the diamond formation and everything else that we more than eagerly go to write about. We see a glimpse of it in practice. We're like, maybe it's gonna be the year, and then it never happens. But Ohio State certainly has the guys at tight end right now. Luke Farrell, Jeremy Ruckert leading the way. You have Cade Stover making the move over from the defensive side of the ball to tight end. Of course, you have Jake Hausman as well. They have the guys. They certainly are going to have a prolific offense. But when you have guys like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and the incoming freshmen and Jameson Williams, et cetera, there are only so many pass balls that can go around. And I don't know what I would set the over-under on tight end receptions to be, but I don't think that we're going to sit there and be looking back in January and say this really was the year of the tight end. So I think we'll have to probably talk about it again in 21 because I don't see it, and it's not because of a lack of talent at the position. I just think it's the structure of Ohio State's offense and the talent that's on the field with all 11.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you're talking about a team that's got the ability to stretch defenses vertically and horizontally with the wide receivers, as young as they might be, you're probably going to have more sets where there are three of them on the field as opposed to just two tight ends. So I don't know. I think that you've got some playmakers there with Farrell. He's kind of the dump down guy. And then Ruckert can be the down the seam guy who can stretch a defense in that regard. And I think that they will use that once or twice a game. So I think he could have some games where he ends up with like 3 catches for 50 yards or something like that. Do we consider that, quote, using the tight end? I don't think it's quite like George Kittle or we saw in the Super Bowl where both teams based everything they did around getting the ball to the tight end. But, I do believe the ability is there. If Kevin Wilson and Ryan Day want to take advantage of it, it'll be there.
Well, I see the Jeremy Ruckert stats down below. I think Brevin Jordan had that like last week for Miami. And it's different at some places. In Ohio State, they rotate those tight ends. But Ryan Day said this week they played 2 tight end sets like a third of the time last year. And one of the reasons they played so much 2 tight ends is because they didn't have a second H-back. They didn't have a second slot guy that they could rely on. Because Jalen Gill never really ascended to that spot. CJ Saunders was injured, so he couldn't do it. And it was basically just KJ Hill and then Jeremy Ruckert or Luke Farrell, whoever the second tight end at that point was. This year, however, I think they're going to have a second slot guy in Jackson Smith and Jigba to take some of those snaps from those 2 tight end sets. So I wonder, does that get knocked down to 25% of the time where it's 2 tight ends? Because I do think they have another option in the slot that they didn't have last year. And I think that will impact the tight ends again. And we'll see, Kevin Wilson gets kind of annoyed when people equate a tight end's production to catches. And when we talk to him today and people ask him about, why don't you get more catches, I'm sure he'll get annoyed again. But I think those catches could be even lower this year. I think Jeremy Ruckert might go higher, but I don't know what to really expect in terms of Luke Farrell. 10 catches, something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, and another name that isn't getting mentioned a lot as well that could be a slot guy is Mookie Cooper as well. So they certainly have that. And during Ryan Day's radio appearance, he talked about once again what the H is. And I mean, what isn't the H? I mean, the H could be a second tight end. It can be this. It can be that. I mean, I think that going back to Urban Meyer, I mean, that H position certainly could have been a little bit of everything at that point. I mean, hell, at one point it was a 240-pound Noah Brown. I mean, which certainly didn't fit to the description that any of us had of the position. I think the other thing too is with Ohio State having a veteran offensive line, I don't know if you're going to necessarily need to have a lot of times where you're in a 12 personnel to keep guys home to block or whatnot. I mean, maybe over at right tackle, as whether it's NPF or it's DeJuan Jones or Paris Johnson, whoever gets there, if there's a little bit of a steep learning curve for them, maybe you have to sit there and attach a tight end to try and slow things down at that point. But, with Ohio State, tight end playbook really being a lot of protection and being kind of that safety guy or whatnot, I don't think that they're going to necessarily need a ton of that. So, I'm going to take the under on the 25% that Tony threw out there, and I'm going to say that it's probably going to be even a little bit less. And and the funny thing is, it all comes back to recruiting. Here in the class of 21, it looks like Ohio State's going to try and take 2 tight ends, or 20. I guess, class of 21. And they're going to try to take 2 tight ends at that point. And Ohio State's been able to bring in some pretty good ones despite never throwing them the damn ball.
Dennis, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, guys. I was typing something and I wanted to make sure that you didn't hear it. That's our joke because Dennis Dodd shows up on these Zoom calls and sometimes he doesn't have his microphone, and it is tricky with Zoom because it's a two-way mute. They mute you and you have to unmute yourself. And any rate, man, I'm struggling. Jeremy Ruckert, 14 catches, but 4 of them were for touchdowns. So that's an important part of your offense. Luke Farrell had 7 catches, 2 of them for touchdowns. Hausman, 2 catches, 1 touchdown. So they accounted for 7 touchdowns. But the 3 of them together, what does that add up to? 2 and 7 is 9, 23 catches in 14 games. A touchdown every other game, but only about 2 catches per game for the tight ends. So I think I would take over that. I think it's going to be more than that this year. I think Ruckert himself could get 20 or more. Just because he's got that kind of ability that he's flashed in the past. And, if you're so caught up in trying to figure out where Olave and Wilson are, and there's maybe a misread and the inside corner goes outside or whatever, or the safety kind of strays out of the middle, then the middle's wide open for the tight end. So I think that there's going to be a lot of times where it won't even necessarily be even a check down. I think it'll just be like in the game against Wisconsin, there was nobody within 20 yards front side back to back of Ruckert. It was just a coverage break, and he was wide open, and they take advantage of it. And that's the great thing about having a quarterback like Fields, who, even though he had not played a lot of football, from really the first game on, Kevin Wilson was talking about it yesterday on the radio show, that she displayed good vision, was a good distributor, and took care of the football above all else. Only 3 interceptions the entire season for him. And we know 2 of them were in the Clemson game that they lost, obviously. But, when you have that kind of guy at the controls, the question Wilson was asked was, how do you take it to the next level with Fields? And he said Ryan Day is doing that by throwing the kitchen sink at him early and often during this preseason, and making him recognize and understand things at a higher level, I think, to prepare him in many ways for what he's going to see in the NFL.
Well, and Kevin talked about the increased or the very good pass blocking they have. You have to assume that Justin is also going to get rid of the ball quicker than he did last year, so you don't maybe necessarily need that tight end. I go back to Jim Trussell whenever he would get asked, why don't you throw to the tight ends more? And he would say, well, if I'm throwing to the tight ends and I'm not throwing to Ted Ginn, I'm not throwing to Santonio Holmes, I'm not throwing to Michael Jenkins or Anthony Gonzalez, and instead he's throwing to Ryan Hamby and Rory Nickel and, Ben Hartsock, and congratulations to all of those guys. But I think like Jeremy Ruckert could be what maybe we thought Jake Stoneburner would be. Even Marcus Baugh would have 20 catches a season for the Buckeyes a couple of times. So I think this year maybe Jeremy Ruckert is the guy that can have stuff devised for him, because with the receivers that Ohio State has this year, the secondary is going to be completely concerned about what's going on there. And with as much time as Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson have had to just write on napkins, as Urban Meyer would say, devise things for all of these different guys, because they're not doing anything else. They can call recruits. They can't go anywhere. You can't, for the longest time, they weren't able to practice. You can't go watch workouts necessarily. So you're just drawing stuff up. So I think if they wanted to, this could be the year where they draw stuff up for Jeremy Ruckert. And I think there's going to be so many times this year where the middle of the field is just completely wide open for whomever. And there's going to be times, Kevin, where it's Trey Sermon, like when it was Oklahoma against Ohio State a couple years ago.
Right. And the one thing that we haven't even talked about is a healthy Justin Fields is a pretty halfway decent runner as well. And while you don't necessarily want to see him out there taking unnecessary hits, I mean, players are going to play, and you need to have that dual threat from Justin Fields. But you bring in pass catching running backs and everything else. I mean, linebackers on opposing teams are going to hate facing the Buckeyes, because the secondary is going to be tied up in knots with the receivers or whatnot. And then you're going to get to pick your poison with either a solid running back coming out of the backfield or Jeremy Ruckert or Luke Farrell or whatnot. And then, oh, by the way, you probably should think about spying Justin Fields as well. So, this offense could be really scary. It could be really scary. And with this season not counting really on eligibility or anything, why redshirt anybody? I mean, Ohio State really, if you're ready to play, they're going to put you out there. So, we're only talking an 8-game regular season anyway. I mean, the potential of getting up to 11. I think that you're going to see guys as soon as they're ready to play and won't be a detriment out there. So, I mean, it's going to be crazy. And I'm sure that Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson, as Tony said, have just boxes and boxes of plays and concepts written up on little cocktail napkins or whatnot. And, some football intern is trying to put them all up on the whiteboard right now over there at the Woody.
Just plugging plays into the iPads, and like the ink is bled through the napkins, and you're trying to interpret what is going on there. And then, Steve, then you can also throw in the play action.
Yeah, no question. And they're going to freeze a lot of people, because you got to respect the run game Ohio State's going to have with Master Teague and Trey Sermon. Reading between the lines on Coach Day's comments yesterday, it sounded like Trey Sermon may have the inside track right now, and that Master Teague needs to show that he is completely 100% back from his Achilles injury. And he'll get that opportunity, I think, during preseason camp without you hope, endangering himself or re-injuring himself. You would hate to see that anybody's best football is left on the practice field. It is going to be a unique year. We've seen with the NFL a lot of injuries in the first couple of weeks, soft tissue injuries, as they say. And is that because that some of the offseason regimens were interrupted and were not as stringent, or as people weren't as diligent in their training, perhaps, leading up to the season as they have been in seasons past? I don't know if it's just a 1 or 2 week anomaly, or if this is something that's going to plague football, the industry of football all season long. So I'm interested to see what Teague can do once he gets in there full go, But you're right. I think Fields, I was just looking at Fields' numbers. He ran the ball 137 times in 14 games, which was 10 a game. Now, Ohio State did give up 35 sacks last season. And I think some of those were his rushing attempts that go on his, probably 30 of those were him. I think they want to clean that up a little bit with 3 returning offensive linemen. I think having a clean pocket is something that is not going to be that big of an issue, I think, for Fields this year. Do they run him more? I think that is on called and designed plays, because at the end of the year he was hurt and they couldn't do that. I mean, they didn't have that wrinkle, so to speak, after the Penn State game. And is that going to be something that's part of the offense? And, I kind of harken back maybe to the Barrett days where he didn't run the ball a whole lot against Rutgers, but against Michigan and Penn State, he was running it 15, 20 times. So could be a thing where they selectively figure out the games where he's part of the run package as well. But at the same time, he's your meal ticket. You don't want him to take undue hits either. So it's a balancing act, and just get me the first down and just put the ball in the end zone is kind of the interesting thing.
If you take out sacks this year, I could see him having as many carries in the postseason as he does the regular season, because you won't necessarily need him to run. Maybe against Penn State, maybe I don't even know if you'll need him too much against Michigan, but in those final 3 games, you're not trying to save him. You're trying to make the playoffs and then win the playoffs. So then it's you do what you can. Ryan Day mentioned Master Teague needing to go from a number 2 to a number 1, and I think Trey Sermon already considers himself a number 1. I mean, he's a graduate, he's a senior, he's a veteran, and I think they need Master Teague to maybe get on that level. But you can't really do it until the pads come out, and we'll see how it goes. I also think it will help having plays designed for him rather than him running plays designed for J.K. Dobbins maybe last year, and you'll get to see more of what Master Teague himself does, because I don't think he closed anywhere near what the hopes were for him or the Buckeyes themselves or the fans. Ryan Day has kind of been critical of him over the last year, where he's said things like, we need to see what he can do against a defense that isn't tired from 3 quarters of just being pounded, and we need to see what he can do in the first and second quarter. And I would agree wholeheartedly with that. And I'm not giving up on him or anything like that. I want to see. I think we all want to see what he can do, because he is probably still the fastest Ohio State running back. He was last year, according to Tony Alford. He's probably the heaviest, probably the strongest. I don't know. Those are pretty good. That's a pretty good combination of things when you are all of those things. And he was on pace for 1,000 yards for the longest time until things got a little bit tougher for everybody. And he won't get there this year. But I think I don't know. Are fans maybe underestimating what he can do this year, do you think?
I think so. And I think that so much of coaching is being able to read your guys and know, who responds well to criticism and who needs to be lifted up, because you sit there and you criticize somebody who needs to be lifted up and they shut down. You sit there and you blow sunshine, blah, 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 to somebody who probably works better with the criticism, and you may not get everything you need out of them. And everything that I've kind of seen out of Master Teague in my conversations and covering him during his recruitment or whatnot, I think he's the guy that can take that criticism well. I think he has that type of fire burning in him, and an angry Master Teague, and he's one of the nicest kids in the world. I mean, probably goes to church 3 times a week, whatnot. Yes or no, sir. Very nice kid. But I think that he has a fire in him, and by challenging him, by pushing him that way, I think that's where you're going to be able to maximize him. And I'm getting seasick watching Steve's camera there. But we did see him come off and just have a great start to the season. And, they played a lot of also rans at that point. And I think once things got a little bit more more difficult, he regressed a little bit. I think just because of the level of competition out there. I have no worries about him being able to come out there. I think he's going to be pushed really hard, or he's going to have to be chasing Trey Sermon a little bit. I mean, depending on how you see that hierarchy going. But I don't really have any major concerns about Teague's ability to do these types of things. I mean, you always do worry about coming off of a severe injury, how things are going to matriculate from there. But beyond that, I think that Ohio State has a tremendous 1-2 punch, and I think those two backs really complement each other, and that's without even talking about a Marcus Crowley or Steele Chambers or Mayan Williams or anybody else.
Demario McCall, even when we're talking about drawing plays up for guys, he's a guy that we've talked about forever about, hey, maybe is this the year that Demario McCall does something? And his best year was his freshman year when he kind of won the backup running back job because there's nobody really else. Has dealt with injuries for his entire career. Ryan Day mentioned that they want to get him in the slot, get him in the backfield. He's really the only H back of the H's that we're talking about. Steve, if I set the over-under on Demario McCall touches on offense from scrimmage this year at 25.5, where are you going?
Man, I was going to say, well, there's a 9-game season you're guaranteed to play.
I think I might be too high.
Yeah, they've
Even
never
with
used
11.
him yet. Why would they start now, particularly with all these shiny toys to play with? He's always just kind of been the insurance policy as opposed to, the guy that you put out front. Very valuable in the return game on kicks if a kick is fieldable, or you're not going to take the touchback, I guess. I don't know. I guess I'd like to get into practice and hear what the coaches are saying about him and how much they've integrated him. And if we ever get a chance to talk to him himself, just without giving away state secrets, just how are they going to use him? I think, he's kind of jockeyed back and forth between the position groups, running back and wide receiver. I've got him currently on the running back group, but the thing that I heard was he was going to probably rep more with wide receivers this year. So, and that could be just because they're so, quote, so young. Plus you've got 4 pretty good running backs who are what you'd call pure running backs, not hybrid type guys like he is. So you really don't need that 5th guy. I mean, Mayan Williams can be the 5th guy. I mean, he's, if he plays, which there's no penalty to play 1 game or 10 games this year. So, you figure if there's opportunities, he'll get to play. So now you're talking about maybe getting him 1 or 2 carries a game and maybe throwing him 2 passes a game. That would get him to like 30. And I can't see it being much more than that. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to know how they're going to do it, but
right. Well, I was going to say, and the thing is that if you're putting him at running back and giving him 1 or 2 carries, we know most running backs need to build up a little bit of a lather and be able to build up to something. You're generally not hitting that home run on your first or second swing out there, so you're really setting them up not to have prolific numbers at that point. So if you do keep them out there with the receivers, who we talked about this with the tight ends, if you're throwing to the Hart Sox and the Nichols of the world, you're not throwing to the Santonio Holmeses. If you're throwing to Demario, and this is not a slight against Demario whatsoever, but you're not out there throwing to Olave or Wilson or at all in that group. So it's difficult. I mean, Demario had those great flashes very early in his career. I mean, let's be real. I mean, a lot of it was done during garbage time, but he was exciting as all hell to watch out there running. But you just have to wonder. I mean, short in stature, I never want it's not a toughness issue. It's a matter of that he just was slight enough that he couldn't he couldn't withstand a lot of heavy contact, and that has always been kind of the problem there at that point, which is why I always felt that putting him out at receiver was a better situation, because I just never really was enamored with the idea of him having to run between the tackles. And yes, his garbage runs were between the tackles, but we're talking about against an inferior gas team in the fourth quarter at that point. Yes, the Rutgers or a bad Illinois or somebody like that at that point. So, I'm hoping for Demario. He's a nice kid, but there are a lot of cards stacked up against him right now, just based on, I've always said with Ohio State, opportunity knocks once if you're lucky, twice if you're insanely lucky. If you don't catch the bus when it stops at your stop, it may never come back around.
Yeah, I think pandemic football, guys could be in and out of the lineup, and you do need to develop depth. You do need to have 3 at every position who are competing, who are producing, who are participating, who are preparing. So I think under those circumstances, maybe the ball gets spread around a little bit more than the laser focus that they've always had on the top 2 or 3 guys. Because I think I go back to like Terry McLaurin. You think about he would run down on those punts, and he would win games for them by running down on punts as much as anything. That Michigan State game with the punter, putting the ball down inside the 20 so many times. And as Meyer used to say, some of those guys get, as he likes to say, blown out because of all the running. I think if you have more bodies to throw at this problem, whereas the defense, the DBs hardly ever rotate, if you come at them with fresh wide receivers all game long who can make plays and run good routes and catch the football, then I think you have created a major problem for the defense. And you hope that they build that depth, 1, to withstand the virus if something were to happen, but 2, so that when you get into a tight spot against, Wisconsin, whoever in the Big Ten championship game, or Alabama or Clemson in the semifinals of the championship of the national championship, you have got more than 1 or 2 people you can turn to and say, okay, remember against blah, we put you in here and you were able to exploit this. That's exactly what we want to do. Clemson showed you last year with the quarterback run and the screens that when you get into the primetime game, the opponent is the best opponent you've played all season, first of all, and they are, unlike North Carolina and Wake Forest, they're able to take away options 1 and 2, or at least contain options 1 or 2, or wrinkles 1 or 2. And now you need to deviate a little bit from your plan and have something in your back pocket. And as Urban said, he was surprised with the way Lawrence was able to run in that game. That was kind of a trump card they played in the biggest game of the season, and were able to win the game that way. So if you have a trump card, and I don't know that Demario McCall fits that definition, but if you have different ways you can attack, and you don't necessarily show those in the first 8 or 9 games and a lot, and could still go back to it, and it's effective, then that makes you that much more dangerous when you get into that spot. Because that's how the game against, other than the bad calls and everything else, Ohio State took the run away. They took the pass away. I mean, their top receivers weren't the ones that exploited it until the last drive when Wade wasn't out there, obviously. They did hit a couple big pass plays on the 80, 90-yard drive, whatever that was. But up until that point, Ohio State had taken the run away. ATN, did he even play in that game? And then the passing game wasn't all that effective, but Clemson found other ways to beat Ohio State.
I just want to go back to a point, Tony. I just heard Steve say that Demario McCall is Trevor Lawrence. So let's note that here at like 11:30 or something here on September 25th.
I just use it as an analogy. I'm not
Lawrence. Year of our Lord 2020.
That's not what I meant.
I heard him call Demario McCall a trump card, where I would consider him more of an offsuit king. It's like, if it goes 3, you're kind of surprised, but it's a bonus.
Good lead.
But I can, I where I think he works best would be as a matchup. And Ryan Davis talked about having him in the slot, moving him into the backfield. And I still don't know why you don't do this 3 times a game. Put him in the slot, move him into the backfield, wheel route 3 times a game. See what happens, because you're going to get 6 touchdowns out of that during the course of a year.
He's going to slip a tackle and go. He's going to slip a tackle and he's gone.
Like Devin Bush couldn't keep up with him.
I saw somebody this past week, and I don't remember which game it was. This brought back terrible memories. Somebody this past week, I have to think which game it was, had their offensive set on the right hash mark. They brought the receiver in motion from right to left. So now all you got is the tight end. And they had the motion of the play and everything going left. And they ran the McFarland backside, for 150 yards. I mean, they had the high shot, the can that hangs over the field right behind the line of scrimmage. And I wish I'd remembered. It conjured up the Maryland memories because the defender completely vacated. And as we went back over those plays, it was like Ohio State, the Schiano defense from 2 years ago completely vacated the boundary side to guard 4 wide receivers that the Maryland quarterback couldn't have gotten the ball to if he had a freaking cannon. I mean, if he had assembled a cannon and shot the ball out of a cannon, there was no way you needed 4 DBs over here 54 yards away from the line of scrimmage. And, I just sat there and chuckled when I saw the play. It was like, oh my God, I've seen this before. And, caught the defense in a bad wrinkle. But here's to saying Kerry Combs won't put the defense in bad positions like that. I mean, you harken back to that year, the last Urban year. They had never given up a play of 90 yards, and they gave up 2 of them in the span of 15 days. In 130 years, they'd never given up a play of 90-some yards, and they gave up 2 of them in 15 days. You hope that, you went from what was pretty sound defense last season, although Hafley, when they put him in the film room for the Clemson LSU game, he's like, oh dear, this wasn't good. They caught us in a bad call here, but hopefully with Combs, I mean, is he learning on the job, or is this more of a Madison thing, or what's it going to be? What do you guys think?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, I think that I definitely have the spirit of collaboration. Greg Madison's been around forever and a day. Kerry Combs went to the NFL to be on Mike Vrabel's staff, learning under Don Pease there. I mean, the thing is that you're always learning. You're always, whether you're, a grade schooler or you're a 60-year-old coach or whatnot, you're always learning. And I think that, maybe the defensive play calling issue may be a little bit of a learn for him at that point. But I think, conceptually, he's not going to struggle with any of that. I recorded a podcast last night that'll be airing later today where we did kind of talk about just some of the pieces in terms of the defensive coaching staff, and the question was brought up. So I think that Madison will be a great safety net there for that situation. And I always felt that when Ryan Day brought in Madison and Jeff Hafley, he brought in Madison not only for his ability to coach, but his ability to coach coaches as well, because it was a mixture of the young and the old on the staff. And while Kerry Combs isn't a spring chicken, he certainly has more energy than the 3 of us combined. I can assure you of that.
Well, and we did get to talk to him this past week, although I shouldn't say we got to talk to him. We got to participate in a Zoom teleconference with Kerry Combs and Seven Banks and Marcus Williamson. And as I described it on my podcast, it's kind of a Russian roulette as to whether or not you'll get your question to the right person. Like we're all asked, well, yes, we want to ask questions, and we're all in a list, and you may or may not get to ask your question of Kerry Combs. And, I was one of the unfortunates who didn't, but because this is the first time we're actually getting to talk to him and really talk to anybody and just get information on the team. Like there were no questions about the defense basically, or Kerry Combs as a play caller. And, if we're sitting around the table with him, we're just going to, bang, 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 like, are you one high? Are you two safeties? What are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? And in the Zoom, you can't do it. It's just like, well, I wanted to ask about Marcus Williamson. Well, how is Tyreek Johnson? How is Seven Banks? And there's no real conversation that you can get into about all this. And I don't know that he would get into it, but there are questions. Ryan Day loves the one high, has said as much that there's probably going to be more two safety looks, and Kerry Combs has kind of alluded to that as well. But we have no idea what kind of play caller he is. I assume he's going to be fun. I assume he's not going to make things so complicated. But there has been the talk of this compartments of defense, like bringing in packages, and I don't know whether that's complicated or because you're bringing in packages for specific services that makes it easier. Because for 2 years straight, Greg Schiano, 2017 and 2018, I would ask him, are you sure this defense isn't too complicated? And he would be like, no. And then, a couple weeks later, he'd simplify things and the players would tell us about it. So I wonder, I can't imagine Ryan Day is going to allow things to get super complicated, but I do think there's an interesting mix of, we don't know what it's going to be. There's going to be a bunch of different sub packages. We will see none of practice, even though if they're going to practice in Ohio Stadium, like Ryan Day said, there's no reason we shouldn't be allowed to see something, because we wouldn't, it's outdoors. Put us up in C deck. I don't care. Although then we would have to ride the same elevator, and they don't want that. But I have no idea what to expect from this defense in terms of how much of this, how much of that is Kerry Combs going to be a good play caller. And I maybe we won't even know until after the Penn State game.
I think the NFL experience for him was a tremendous positive. One of his first interviews back at Ohio State, he talked about how going to the NFL, he was exposed to so much more in terms of scheme that, let's say you only used the left half of your brain when you were in college. At the professional level, you see different teams that try to attack you different ways each week. And he said we ran every defense known to man in the 2 years that he was with Mike Vrabel there with the Tennessee Titans. And so to me, that only bodes well for him having an answer, so to speak. So if they get into a Virginia Tech type situation, where they're doing something that, we've never seen before or whatever.
Did not exist ever before.
Yeah.
What the hell is that?
It's flipped, I know, because it was the Virginia Tech defense that was doing it to the Ohio State offense. But if you get into some kind of a scheme that is just gashing Ohio State, you are hopeful that he has got the answer, because in his last two seasons, and the proof was in how great they played last season. It's not like he's coming from a 6-10 NFL team. They were a few plays from going to the Super Bowl. So, obviously nobody had an answer for Mahomes, but, I think that for what they did was very impressive.
Yeah.
You mentioned all of the defenses in the world he knows. That's kind of my concern. Like, it's okay if you know them, don't try to teach all of them, and I guess, and not that they would face all of these different kinds of offenses, but they do face, I think they face different styles in college than you do in the NFL. And so you got to be wary of the paralysis by analysis, but also you are more talented than the teams you play. So you don't need to find every single nook and cranny of an advantage, because you still have Zach Harrison.
Well, you also look to, it's a quarterback-driven system in so many places, and who really are going to be the great quarterbacks that Ohio State's going to face on its schedule in the
Joe Milton.
I'm going to say, he is Cam Newton, Jesus Christ, and Tyrannosaurus Rex all rolled into one, or
with longer arms.
something that I read on some article or something like that.
Ryan Day propped up Martinez on the radio show, and I had to look, and I was astounded. They scored 7 points against Ohio State last year.
Jack Cohn. Jack Cohn.
You can go. I was going to say, don't bring up that guy, but you could go through Ohio State's schedule, and I'd like to say that I study this stuff for a living or whatnot, and I'm struggling to name all the quarterbacks that they're going to face at that point. So I think that they have a good chance to work on installation or whatnot, and be able to have a situation of where they'll be ready for any particular wrinkle they can get. I mean, a downside is there are no open weeks on the schedule, so you're not going to get that 2-week period to prepare for a game, or more importantly, I think, to go in and focus on yourself and work on fundamentals or whatever. It's always going to be install for the next opponent. There's not going to be a lot of inward looking or whatnot. But I think that you certainly have to keep an eye on the prize too. I mean, I think you need to keep an eye on what could potentially be out there on the horizon, because while Artur Sikowski or the other dude, I can't have Rutgers or who, I mean, maybe they face Tua's younger brother at Maryland. I mean, I don't know what their situation is with as many people that have opted out there. I mean, but there are not a lot of quarterbacks on this schedule that necessarily jump off the page, other than Joe Milton, because of his the recent article saying how good he is, and then just fresh in our minds, Ryan Day talking about Adrian Martinez.
Michael Penix, Indiana.
Yeah,
Sean Clifford, Penn State.
Clifford probably might be the best.
Probably is the best, and they've managed to avoid Penix the last couple of times because he's either been hurt or whatever, and they've gone against Peyton Ramsey. But the thing about a Michael Penix is they face a better version of him every day in practice.
Yeah. The thing I would go back to on defense is during this run, and really it's been a 20-year run when you think about starting with Tressel and up through Meyer and now Day, the one area on defense that has been tremendously consistent is the run defense. And Ohio State, year in and year out, is in the top 10, top 20, maybe some years. But it's rare that they get gashed in the run defense. And you lost your 2 defensive tackles, your All-American defensive end, who was a pretty good run player on top of being a good pass rusher. You have 3 starters back in the front 7, and I'm counting Cooper Smith at defensive end basically as one guy. They both started 4 games last year. So, and then Borland and Werner are back. Browning played quite a bit at linebacker. What do you guys think? Do you think there'll be a tremendous drop-off with run defense? Because it really sets the tone. When first down, they run the ball and they get 2 yards, it's 2nd and 8. And now they pretty much have to throw the ball on 2nd and 3rd down, and kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of what to call and what to execute and what to do. I mean, Ohio State's success is pinned largely because on first down, they pick up 6, 7, 8 yards running the football. Now the entire playbook is you could throw a deep pass on 2nd and 3. I mean, you can do anything. So to me, they always put the opponent behind and down in distance. And a lot of that is pinned back to run defense. And is it going to be as stout as it has been in years past?
I don't think so. I think Tommy Togiai is going to be great, be really good. I think they're thin at overall on the interior, though. Who's your second DT, your second nose tackle, Antoine Jackson, who may have to play some 3 technique right now with Haskell Garrett on the mend. Should eventually play, from what Ryan Day has said and what Kerry Combs has said. But when, now it could Tommy Togiai and Teron Vincent at the 3 tech, both outstanding recruits. They could be the best duo in the Big Ten. We just don't know that yet. And Teron Vincent was the number 1 defensive tackle in the 2018 class by a number of services. And so the possibilities are there. Is he healthy? Sounds like it. Larry Johnson said he was starting to get back into his pass rushing burst back in the spring. So those 2 could be totally outstanding. And Antoine Jackson could be a good flex guy. It could be really good backup nose tackle. Haskell Garrett could eventually come back and be very good at the 3-tech. But there's not a lot of depth behind them when you've got former tight end in Cormonte Hamilton as a 3-tech. You've got the 3-star Jaden McKenzie, who redshirted last year. Jerron Cage this is his 4th year now and has maybe had 20 defensive snaps in his career. So I think the front line should be really good, but this is a defensive line that rotates. So I wouldn't be surprised to see like a Tyler Friday rotating in a defensive tackle a lot on the Rushman packages. We know Zach Harrison will do that as well, especially if you got Baron Browning dropping down at defensive end on passing downs, because then if Jonathan Cooper's out there as well, you're going to have to slide Tyreek Smith or Zach Harrison or Tyler Friday inside. So maybe they can get away with the lack of depth at defensive tackle, but I think it's a concern, especially, Kevin, during a pandemic.
Right. I mean, and as everybody had mentioned, I mean, just the necessity for depth here during these uncertain times, and on the defense, they're high on potential and maybe short on experience at some positions. So, I think to expect them to come right out and be holding teams to 3, 7, 10 points immediately, I think maybe based on history more so than really looking at personnel or whatnot. So I think that I think that the defense is going to have to really kind of find itself, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress. And they're going to be tested in week 1 against Adrian Martinez and his ability to do a lot of everything out there. They're going to certainly be tested in week 2 with Sean Clifford and his ability. And then the schedule lightens up for them with that Rutgers Maryland window or whatnot. And I think by the time that they reach the halfway point, we'll have a really good idea what this defense is. But I mean, can we necessarily say what we expect out of Antoine Jackson, what we expect out of some of these guys, what we expect out of the young guys? We really don't know at this point. So while a lot of the computer modeling has Ohio State a double-digit favorite in every game short of Penn State, that may be a double-digit model that says that Ohio State is going to win those types of games 42-24 more so than 35-3.
Yeah.
Speaking of shootouts, the Pac-12 is back. The shootouts and no defense. The Pac-12 is back, playing 7 total games. It's a 6 regular season and then a 1 plus 1 as much as the Big Ten did. Regarding the question from Texas or busted, will the CFP push things back to get those games in? The games are in, so everything is scheduled to be squeezed in. So everything has been shortened to make sure that they get into that CFP cutoff of, I believe, December 20th. So there's no concerns about, the games have been scheduled. Whether or not they get them in is the same concern for everybody. And when people wonder, is 7 games enough for the Pac-12? It could be if there are only 9 games in the SEC and you've got a 7-0 versus an 8-1 Auburn or whatever. And we can't answer these questions yet because you have to look at what they did, what those teams did, because that's how things go. We need information. We can't just go based on records. And so, we'll see how that goes. I don't expect a Pac-12 team in the playoffs at 7-0, mainly because I don't expect a Pac-12 team to be 7-0. So it's hard for me to, imagine an undefeated Pac-12 team.
I would just throw in that they're not pushing this back. The Rose Bowl is played on January the 1st, and I know it's part of the playoff scenario this year. And I know that all the hoopla surrounding, there may even be fans at the game for all we know at this point. Although when you get down to the last game, it's kind of like you've made it to the end of the line. It's probably okay to play. It's like baseball is going to play some of the playoffs with maybe the league championship series and World Series will be at neutral sites in Texas, I guess. But they're going to bring some fans in for those games. So, and why not? I mean, you've reached the end of the season at that point. So, if you do it in a safe manner, maybe a quarter of the stadium filled or whatever. I don't think they're going to push the playoffs back because of any of this. I think that they are going to move forward, and unless the entire industry is shut down, which I've seen no inclination that that's going to happen. I mean, if everybody in America comes down with it, then yeah, I mean, perhaps there'd be something drastic would happen, but I don't foresee that.
Yeah, to echo Steve, as long as the college football playoffs are occurring, they're not moving the dates, and the Pac-12 could play 7, 17, or 70 games. It isn't really going to matter. There will not be a Pac-12 team in the college football playoff, short of them expanding the field to 7, 17, or 70 teams. Like
Dave Biddle says, when Jalen Gill transfers to Boston College, his playing time at Ohio State will remain unaffected. The Pac-12's playing time in the playoff, whether it's 7, 17, or 77, will remain unaffected.
So you don't think a 54-16 USC team can make the playoffs?
not when one of those wins are against
Alabama and Clemson.
They're all real dogs out there. I mean, I don't even. God, the Pac-12 has been so far off of my mind right now, and I know we're just our ratings are caving right now west of the Rockies, but not concerned. I mean, you know what? Yeah, if you play 70 games and 20 of them are against Stanford, I really don't give two squats.
Today, I think we find out if the MAC comes back. Pretty much everybody else is coming back now with shortened seasons. I would kind of bummed because I was hoping to see some winter, spring college football. I wouldn't mind that. Yeah,
action on a Tuesday night in February.
No, but we'll have FCS. So
yeah, we will have that as well.
Yeah, so we'll have something, but yeah, I believe that the MAC will come back. There's still a couple of teams though that just are superseding their conferences who aren't playing. It was like New Mexico State, Connecticut, and I don't remember the third one, but it'll be nice to get the band back together, even if it is for a shortened set list. And I am excited about having more diversity of games because I don't need to see any more South Alabama. I'm done.
God,
enough of them. I'm done.
They're putting these Sunbelt games on in prime spots, and I'm like, Jesus, dude, I my head hurts. I can't. No,
I forget the ABC noon game tomorrow, but it's like, shouldn't you be on ESPN Plus?
Well, they had to replace Notre Dame and Wake Forest. It was a game. I'll keep going and I'll find it.
Yes, I might read it too, but yeah, there have been some Jefferson Pilot game worthy games that have been in.
I thought Raycom was dead.
Major slots, and it's been pretty brutal.
It's Central Florida and East Carolina. East Carolina is not ready for prime time, and in fact, they're a 27-point underdog. But ABC, I think ESPN just said, well, we got to put something. We promised the ABC. If they dumped out last week, or Fox had to dump out last week, had a game scheduled and didn't have it. So I turned to 28, Fox 28. They had the local station put on Ring of Honor Wrestling instead of a football game at noon.
Yeah, Jeff Blake is not walking through those doors at East Carolina, people.
No.
The ACC network has a better noon game, I believe, than ABC, but that's because of the way things were drafted. The previous question about Zach Harrison coming into his sophomore year as a freshman was very similar numbers-wise to Chase Young and to Nick Bosa. The question then becomes, will he do the same thing that Chase Young did as a sophomore, which is, like 10.5 sacks? I don't think that's going to happen because Chase Young did it in 13 games, 13 or 14 games. Chase Young also did it on 2 bad ankles for about 5 or 6 weeks. So he probably could add 13 or 14 sacks that year. If I put the over under on, let's say 7.5 sacks for Zach Harrison, where are you guys going?
I would say you're right there because you're only going to play 10 games or 11 at the most. What's that?
11.
Okay, 11 at the most. If he gets 8 sacks in an 11-game season, I think you got to be pretty happy with that. If he gets more than that, you got to think All-American type numbers for him potentially, because he has a way to impact the game. And Coach Day talked a lot about he and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who really hasn't done a whole lot, just kind of scratched the surface of what he can do. They have a different body type. They have the long, slender body type with long arms and can reach out, get off a block and reach out and grab the running back. And so to me, in one instance, or use that range and body type to work a tackle and get around him to make the pass rush. But I'm bullish on Zach Harrison. I think you have Cooper, you have Tyreek Smith, you have Jean-Baptiste, and you have Harrison. That's 4 pretty good ones. I don't know who else I wrote down. Tyler Friday is in that mix as well. And then you're down to Noah Potter and Cormonte Hamilton. And Darian Henry Young, I think, could be a defensive end as well. So, yeah, he's going to have every opportunity.
I'll just jump in quickly. If you're saying 7.5, I'll say over just barely. But
Yeah.
I think so. I think just so much is going to be predicated on the way that the rest of the line plays, because if you're able to sit there and really focus on shutting down Zach Harrison, obviously that number is not going to be realized. But I think the line is going to end up being pretty good, especially as things get going. And honestly, he could get 2.5 sacks against Rutgers and still be sitting on the bench for 2 quarters of that game or whatnot. So, there certainly are a couple of games to where stats could be padded.
And the last one before we go, JT Tuamalo and Emeka Egbuka. No, there's no traveling, there's no visiting. So I think Egbuka was supposed to be around September, right, Kevin? Is that correct, Steve?
He always made it sound like it was. I mean, first of all, he's impossible to reach. So, there's not a lot of conversation with him, but it always seemed like it was going to be later. It wasn't going to be before his senior season or anything like that. I've always kind of felt both would be January guys, and I don't think that the dead period is going to get lifted in advance of this. So, I mean, we're already to December 31st. What's another 5 weeks after that point? I think that we won't have any visits for this cycle.
Yeah, I'm not sure if those guys – I've tried to keep track of who's playing and who isn't. Are they able to play in Washington State right now? Or because that would have been if they were unable to play but could get out of there and come in for a visit. See, the issue is – and I've flown to Seattle twice, once for the Washington game, and the other time we were working with Scout.com, which was based in Seattle. And you fly from Columbus to Detroit – and then it's 5 hours from Detroit to Seattle, or you fly, an hour and a half, 2 hours to Minnesota or Minneapolis, and then 3 or 4 hours it's an all-day excursion to get there and back. So you really have to take 3 days. Yeah, it looks like Kevin's saying they're going to play in the spring, it sounds like. And it'd be interesting whether those guys would play, because it's the same premise. Why would you play in the spring when you have a chance at your college to come in and play in the fall? So kind of the Jack Sawyer principle, I guess. I know that there was some hope or thought that he might come back and play. I haven't heard anything in that regard. That'd be kind of hard to do in week 4 now, but I'm actually going to Pick Central. This will be my second time to see Pick Central this year. They're playing Lancaster. I've been assigned to cover that game for the Lancaster newspaper tonight, so I'm interested to see. Newark had nothing for the Stiles brothers in week 2 or 3, whatever. Tony was there. Tony and Tom Moore were there. We were all kind of looking at each other, scratching our heads like, well, this was a wasted trip, other than you guys got a chance to talk to them. But yeah, I'm hoping to see what they have to offer tonight against a little better team in Lancaster.
Yeah, and JTT has always been a signing day type of guy in terms of what he's been saying. So just if you don't hear anything this fall, maybe no news is good news. But I think most people expect both of them to end up at Ohio State. So I think that'll wrap it up for this edition. Thank you all for watching. Let's all say who we are and where they can find us. Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove. Where can people find you?
At Buckeye Grove. No, but on Twitter at Kevin_noon or at BuckeyeGrove.com or OhioState.rivals.com.
Steve?
Steve Hellwagon on Twitter, just as it's spelled there on the screen, one word, and bucknuts.com, 24/7 sports. And again, looking forward to football. What do we have left, guys? 4 weeks to the first game, and it'll be here before we know it. So looking forward to that.
Absolutely. And I was your humble host today. I won't be next Friday. That'll be Steve's turn. He may not know that yet, but you can find me at BuckeyesScoop.com, at Tony Gerdeman on Twitter. Thank you all for watching, and we will talk to you guys hopefully this time-ish next week.